Good evening, and thanks again for another edition of Ideas Exchange. Will come your way on Wednesdays between this hour and 9 o'clock. Tonight, our focus is going to be on the power sector because there is some crisis. The independent power producers have served notice by June 30th of this year. In the next 2 or 3 weeks, if government is not able to settle their debts, it will shut down production, which means Dumso could be back. What we know is that government owes independent power producers as much as $1.4 or $1.5 billion. Government has made an attempt in the past to engage them to restructure their debts, but the independent power producers are saying no. Many people are wondering whether the IMF money that is coming in could be used to settle these independent power producers. But experts suggest that may be difficult. Now, 11 years ago, many people anticipated that when we are able to solve our energy crisis, we will take lessons and we will never go back to where we were. So 11 years ago, around this time, many people appreciated what Dumso actually meant. Businesses were crippled, individuals lost their jobs, government could not rake in more revenue because if businesses are not producing, it would mean that their profit margins will be low. And if it is low, it means that whatever government anticipates in terms of revenue would obviously be very minimal. Also around that time, Ghana largely depended on light crude oil for production for the thermal energy plants. And then the gas supply was coming from Nigeria. So many of you heard at the time West Africa Gas Pipeline, or what they called WAPCO at the time. But between 2013 and 2016, you would notice that the heat of the crisis created the impression that government was actually not able to pay Nigerians, and that is why they cut supplies. But WAPCO at the time issued a statement around 2015-2016 that they had a certain damage in the supply of gas, that's the pipeline and the sea, and so they could not feed the Asoglitama plant and others within the Tema Power Enclave. And that is where we are. But I know that fast forward, a lot of investments have taken place. And I'm citing one of them for the purpose of this conversation because all of us know very well of Car Power Ship or Ameri Plant or several others that the experts I'm going to engage tonight will help us to appreciate. But this one is specific to the Ghana Gas Project. And so the video I have pulled is about 10, 11 years old. This video they are going to show on the screen was when John Mahama, in one of his rounds, decided to go to one of these sites. That is where the Atuabo gas power plant was. We know that the Atuabo gas power plant was a capital-intensive project. At the time, Ghana was expecting some 3 billion Sino-Hydro loan to facilitate the project to enhance our oil and gas sector. This project, I'm told, actually started around 2011, 2012, and then 2014, between January and I think November thereabout, almost 10 months, the project was stalled. Then around December 2014, the mechanical work was completed, and this gas power plant was complete. You would notice from two brief messages that the former president and now current president Nana Akufo-Addo gave in this brief I've put together will help you to appreciate what it means to do a lot of investment in the energy sector. In Mahama's conversation, as is captured in this video I am sharing with you, you would notice that he makes reference to what this will do. Let's go back briefly and listen to John Mahama.
Ultimately, it's dependent on this project site where we are seated today, because this is the project that will give us our own gas that we can rely on 24/7, 365 days a year. Apart from the gas that is currently being produced at the Jubilee field, the Adjoining field, which is called the 10 field, has also found a considerable amounts of gas. And then next to the Jubilee field, also towards the east, there's an ENI Vitol field that has also found a lot of gas. And the pledge I make to the people of Ghana is that by the grace of God, with the planning that we are putting in place, never again will this our land be covered in darkness, by God's grace.
And you'd notice that he took the flak. He was accused of being incompetent. NDC government was under pressure. Businesses were angry. Ghanaians were angry. And so that was the investment done in one of such projects in the energy sector pool. Then the subsequent video I'm going to show will reflect the visit to the plant by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, who is the president of Ghana today as we speak. You remember at the time the conversation was that they were not too sure about the investment, whether the promises or the pledges that were being made were factual or being exaggerated. And so during Akufo-Addo's visit with Osafo Mafu, was then the senior minister, and this video is 5 years old. And this video is from the website of the government's own website. I'm talking about a video packaged by the Communications Bureau of the Jubilee House under this particular president. Now listen to the briefing and you would appreciate what this conversation will be about.
Just comes in as a dry gas and then it joins the gas that is processed from here and goes all the way to Abuate. Okay.
So what is the overall capacity of this place?
This plant can handle 150 million standard cubic feet of gas.
Which translates into how much megawatts of power?
That will be about 900 megawatts. About 900 megawatts. Currently, we are doing about 600 megawatts of that. So with 10 coming through, we will just about hit its capacity.
So what is it doing in terms of the pricing for us? All of this going to the thermal process, the thermal power. What is it doing for the country in terms of bringing down energy costs and prices?
The good thing for using gas for thermal generation is that it actually reduces your price. Currently, even with the depressed oil prices, where you can cheaply buy oil to power your thermal plants, we could still be saving $10 million by switching from oil to gas, the LCO to gas, $10 million a month.
Oh, wow.
Just by using gas.
That's serious. Yes. You're saying that now the entire facility is being run by Ghanaians.
Absolutely, and we're very proud of that. If you look around, His Excellency, you see that both men and women here, they run the plant. And in comparison to our neighbors like Nigeria, for instance, it took them 40 years to become total.
So you saw the conversation there, very instructive, that we are saving $10 million even if we are buying oil at the cheapest, oil at the cheapest price, powering the thermal energy plants within the Abuade power enclave, which have gone through a lot of retrofitting or expansion, etc., etc. Is going to, so if we are saving $10 million a month over the period that we know that the Atuabo gas plant has been very, very supportive of our energy sector pool, why, even with ESLA, that was introduced to manage debt, that today we owe $1.5 billion, and we may go back to doomsday we suffered as far back as 2011, 2012, 2013 to 2016. My guest tonight in the studio with me is a research policy and programs officer at the Institute of Energy Security. He's Adam Yakubu. I will introduce him shortly. Adam, you are welcome.
Thank you very much.
You were invited here at short notice. First of all, I want to thank you very much for joining this conversation, because actually we had wanted to engage the independent power producers as well. But for strategic reasons, they are bowing out because they are still engaging. But we know June 30th is the deadline they have given to government. Yes. You are welcome.
Thank you very much.
In the course of the conversation, we'll also be joined via Zoom by Dr. Charles Jemfi Ofori. He's the policy lead and climate change and energy transition officer at the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ASEP, will be joining us via Zoom. Now, first of all, you monitored the preamble.
Yeah.
what was going through your mind as you were listening as far as our effort to manage our power crisis is concerned?
Yeah, so let me say good evening to you and good evening to your listeners wherever they are listening to us from. What happens is that the power sector is a very critical sector, and so it is always worrying when we have this news of power shortages, power crisis, because what it literally does is that industry would be shortchanged, because when there's no power, definitely industry cannot work. So it's not just about having the crisis, but it is going to raise a whole lot of issues. And I know a lot of people had the experience some 10 years back, and I'm not sure any of us would want to have that experience. You close from work and you get home and the lights are out. And just a few days back, or some few months back, weeks back, we had some hitches and you could see the experience. I'm not sure we are ready for that. And so critical investments over the last 15 years, per my checks, have been going on in the energy sector, but we still get caught up with the issue of power crisis. We'll look at the issues.
Now, what could be the reason why we appear to be going down the ladder again in spite of what gave us some respite after 2016? Now, I will ask this question in twofold. Yeah. First of all, we have the Energy Commission. Yeah. The Energy Commission is supposed to play a strategic role. Yeah. In my research, I went to their website. There's virtually nothing at their website. You only see the executive director's picture and a brief about him. Yeah. That's all at the Energy Commission's website. Yeah. I went to the Energy Ministry's website, and there's nothing there. Yeah. No proper data that you can really consume. Yeah. Much of what I'm seeing is between 2017 and 2020, 2021. So it will look like they've shut down whatever happened before 2017. Yeah. What are your own observations and concerns about what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so sometimes government communication with regards to data is really difficult for we researchers, and so it is not peculiar to the media. Even researchers, sometimes we have that difficulty accessing some critical documents to be able to peruse the issues and be able to contribute to significant national debate. What that does is that it leaves you to conjecture, and which is very difficult for research and also policy engagement, because when you conjecture, you end up by just guessing, but when you have the facts, you're able to speak to them. And I think
okay, so that's very instructive. But let's look at where we are now. We know that government has been making some effort in the energy sector. Mm-hmm. We are told that even within the last 2-3 years, government has signed some new energy contracts, and that may add on eventually to what we are talking about now. While we are having this conversation, I will ask my producers to share the footages of some energy sector investments. These are capital intensive projects. I was privileged to go to Lebanon and then Turkey when the car power ship was being constructed. So I saw it from the scratch, and we saw it at the completion stage. We went to Lebanon because the owners of car power ship wanted us to appreciate why Lebanon has chosen to use thermal power, and of course produced on the sea, because that will come as if it is private property that is supplying them. So when Israel is attacking them, they won't attack that facility, so they'll be guaranteed of constant power. Now, if you look at the investments we have done, has it been worthy of the money involved? Because politics is being played around these issues. Yes, like I did state in my introduction, the power sector is critical, and so no amount of investment is enough. Over the past 15 years, if I can recall, between 2006 to 2010, government invested about $1 billion. It's moved on from then to between 2013, some $498 million was also invested. Where we had the critical investment or the heavy investment was when we introduced the emergency power plants. That's about $2 billion was invested around 2014, 2015 into the sector. And just in 2021, government did indicate that they are planning to invest some $10 billion over the next 10 years. It should tell you how critical the sector is. And so no amount is enough for the sector, because it's so important and so crucial that a little drop of it, then we are in crisis. Now, I did some research, for example, as we speak, the total installed capacity for existing plants in Ghana is about 4,132 megawatts, if my figures are right. Hydro alone gives us 38%.
Yeah.
Thermal 61%, and solar as less as 1%. Yeah. Now, looking at the strategic nature of demand at peak time or as we are expanding industry, and then of course household dependence on power is also increasing. Yeah. What critical observations has IES made that are of concern that you think that we need to look at even as we gravitate towards the concerns raised by the IPPs?
Yes, so one thing that is important and is critical is that first of all, the world is moving to green energy, or is the renewable energy as it is we are known for. But the funny thing in Ghana is renewable energy does less than 5% of our total energy mix, and that is worrying. What is doing a chunk of it is the thermal generation.
Now, for the purpose of those who may not appreciate the technical terms, when we say renewable energy, what does it mean?
So the issues of solar, the issues of biofuels, and wind and all those are the renewable energies and the green energies. Then we have the thermal plants, which is what we know as the IPPs in Ghana. They are doing almost 70% of our total energy mix. Then we have our traditional hydro from Bui, Akosombo and Pong put together do some 30%. Just the last PURC review of tariffs, they adjusted the figure after IES had raised concerns about the formula they use to determine the tariff, because what happens is that when you use a particular method, depending on how much the percentages you give to each of these
power producers,
that is hydro, thermal and renewable, depending on what you consider as the factors, the percentage each one takes informs how much we pay as tariff. So when the first quarter review was done and we got the 30%, IES did indicate that no, given the waterhead levels at Akosombo, we could do some more, thereby reducing the thermal in the energy mix, then we'll get at least a balance. And I'm sure it was factored into the recent one. That's why we had some 18%. Even though it's still a little high, but compared to 30%, we think that that is better. So looking at the thermal plants, let me narrow it down to that. Okay. Why they are important is, one, they are foreign companies. We pay them in foreign currency, which is the United States dollar. So when we, issues of cedi depreciation is not always in the petroleum sector, even in the energy sector, because when they are determining the weighted average cost of gas, which is to be paid, is determined in the in dollars. And so if you have more of thermal plants in your generation mix, definitely you would have your utilities going.
Where does the Atuabo gas plant, that's the Ghana Gas Project, come in to give us proper cushioning? Because you notice that when President Akufo-Addo visited there in 2017, the assurance from the engineers managing the plant was that we're saving as much as $10 million a month, even if we are buying light crude oil at the lowest level. Today, crude oil is quite high, which means light crude oil automatically will also be pegged along those lines, which means we are making more gains compared to the understanding I got from that briefing.
Yeah, so what is important in the briefing is that you see he did indicate that when we do the gas, in this case, the gas he's referring to is Atuabo, which is owned by the government of Ghana or the Ghanaian citizen. And what we used to depend on, the West African gas, which is coming from Nigeria, is denominated in a foreign currency, like I did state. So if we are doing Atuabo, it means we are doing it in cedi denomination, which is relatively cheaper if you are importing. So that is some critical. So when we have internal investment of some of these critical sectors, that's the gains we make, because that idea of always we have to denominate it in foreign currency is completely eliminated. And it is one of the arguments government used when they were introducing gold for oil, that when they do it, it means the products are being traded in the local currency, which is the cedi, and whatever exchanges are made with the foreign is used to pay outside. So we don't really feel the pressures of Forex. And so it is critical that we do some critical investments in the power sector. And at Wabo, let's be factual and let's state it emphatic that it was a strategic investment.
Now, so that could be one strong point to the benefit of Ghana and Ghanaians, because if we buy more for gas in terms of pricing, or maybe we didn't really change many of those thermal plants at the the Abadze Power Enclave, or maybe the Tema Power Enclave, we may have been paying more tariffs for electricity than now. So that's good news. Yeah. But there was a plan to expand the pipeline from Abadze to Tema. Yeah. And the idea was that they were going to pipe the gas to supply the plants at Abadze, and then it will continue to Tema. Yeah. This project was supposed to have started around 2016. For you as a critical stakeholder and somebody who monitors the sector, what have you been observing? What do you know? What can you share with us?
Yeah, so when you look at, just like you did rightly conclude that when there's a change of government, a lot of things have to change, and a lot of critical investment would need to be stored, because the new government needs to do its homework, as we know, because some of those issues are campaigned with. And so definitely government will say, we will have to review, we will have to relook at this. This was not well negotiated. And so oftentimes that is what we have observed in the power sector. And it is one of the issues that we are currently going to look at when we go into the details of the IPPs and the debt they owe.
Okay, so before we go to the IPPs, my guest in the studio is Adam Yakubu. He's the Research Policy and Program Officer at the Institute of Energy Security. He may come across as a very young person, but this is somebody who is well-read, well-researched, and understands the topics. Now, just some few days ago, the World Bank country director has stoked some controversy. The controversy has been around power purchase agreements, excess capacity, and whether they were of the best negotiation skills that inures to the benefit of Ghana, or is the reason why we are suffering. Now, listen to Frank Laporte briefly, and you will understand why the NDC feels angry. And I'll play back their response yesterday as far as the minority in parliament is concerned. But let's listen to the World Bank country rep.
The first one is your tariff structure. Basically, the reason why you've seen tariff increases is because Ghana is selling energy to the public and to companies lower than production costs. Normally, in a balanced equilibrium mode, or in modern economies, tariffs reflect the cost. Like anything, if you build a house, you buy material for $1 million, you cannot sell the house for, for $500 million. You lose money. So as an energy producer, you should be able to recover your costs, because if you don't recover your costs, who will do it for you? It's government. So that's one of the things tariff have to be adjusted, and there is a lot of work being done, not just a tariff structure. Yeah. Tariff adjustment is one thing, but your whole tariff system, tariff structure have to be done, and this is being worked on, and I think there's progress there. Where there's a lack of progress is in collection. You produce electricity, you sell, and then you don't collect the money. Where is the money going? Either people are stealing electricity, or some companies are not paying, and is ECG doing enough to collect? Probably not, as we see. And they recognize that they are implementing reforms. Hopefully, we will support to improve collection. Sometimes, it's not only in Ghana, governments don't pay their bills. Yeah. But here, I think, again, as part of this whole things, there's debt from a long time. Some governments, some ministries don't pay, and government has to get tough. You get your budget, you pay your bills. Otherwise, there are consequences. So collection is another thing. And technical losses. Technical losses is when you produce, you distribute electricity, and because either the cables are old, the infrastructure is old, then it gets lost somewhere there. And this requires investment. So these three things are important. But another one, in the case of Ghana, is those contracts that you've signed, those PPAs, are just too expensive. Too expensive, and the kind of PPAs you sign is take or pay, which means Ghana is paying to the electricity that is not even being produced. Yeah. You have double capacity. Yes, over time, usage will improve, so your excess capacity will go down. But the fact is, in the last few years, Ghana entered into some PPAs that were the...
So that's been the controversy around the energy sector. This issue about excess capacity we are not using, and the fact that Ghana is paying so much has come up severally. And so when the World Bank country director spoke, government felt vindicated because they were using the World Bank as the reason to back what they have sustained to suggest that the NDC didn't fix the energy crisis, they fixed it, i.e. NPP government. Again, if Ghana is in an economic mess today, it is not because of NPP, but it is because of what NDC did. So NDC didn't solve the energy crisis. All the investments that were made were bogus because it is an albatross on Ghanaians. And listen to the response by the minority in parliament. John Jinapor was former deputy minister for power.
We wish to say that President Mahama is not the cause of the current economic mess. We're in this mess because of reckless borrowing and wrongful management of the economy by the Akufo-Addo Bawumia-led government. On the issue of take or pay, Mr. Laporte may wish to provide us with evidence of our peers in terms of countries within Sub-Saharan Africa that always succeeds in bringing in investors who are willing to spend over $300 to $600 million for projects in times of emergency without demanding any form of supply guarantee. Just to educate Mr. Laporte, energy sector projects are capital intensive. They have a long gestation period. The contracts are always of long duration, and more importantly, they are market restricted, which means that you can't just bring a power plant here and then sell it to anybody. You ought to have an off-taker, and most financial institutions would demand some form of guarantee. A comprehensive study, and we shall provide that document for you, published by the African Development Bank, titled Comparative Analysis of Electricity Tariffs in ECOWAS member countries, will confirm that Ghana's electricity tariffs, both generation and end-user tariffs, are one of the lowest. Indeed, Ghana's end-user tariff is lower than that of La Côte d'Ivoire. And so any attempt to claim that Ghana's energy cost or tariff is the highest in the sub-region is false. And the document is there to prove. On the issue of capacity charges, let us educate all that capacity charges are nothing but standardized and regulated industry tools used by electricity utilities to recover infrastructure expansion costs and development costs. Indeed, the right term is capital recovery. And for your information, even before President Mahama, most of the thermal plants had capacity charges. Just to cite a few examples, Asogli had capacity charges, TICO has capacity charges, Sen Power has capacity charges, Senate has capacity charges, TT2PP has capacity charges. And so capacity charge or capital recovery is not new. But even more importantly, after President Mahama left office, the MPP government, the current MPP government, has signed PPAs that has take or pay or capacity charges embedded in them. You'll recall that President Mahama brought in the AXA plant, which is a 370 megawatt plant. We signed it for 5 years. That was during emergency. Immediately the contract expired around June, July. 2 months after, this current MPP administration signed a new contract for the same plant, extending the years from 5 years to 15 good years. Not only did they extend it to 15 years, if you read the contract contains take or pay clauses or capacity charges. As if that is not enough, they've gone further to sign another 205 megawatt thermal plant with AXA for 20 years. And in that contract, there are take-or-pay clauses. In addition to that, they have signed a contract for gas supply with Tema LNG for LNG gas supply. That contract, if you compare to what we did with Sankofa, which cost $6.1 per MMBTU, that gas, based on the PURC's WACO, which is the average cost of gas, it is 8.3 USD per MMBTU.
Of the response by the minority in parliament, that was John Jinapo. We have take or pay, take and pay. In our part of the world, a developing country without much resource, and then the dependence on energy cannot be almost immediate, because as we expand our economy, that is when we graduate the need for power. Is it easy to get take or pay or take and pay? Help us.
Yes. So, what the World Bank director did was to wake us up as a country that we need to do something about our power sector. And so we were expecting, or policy people are expecting, that both government and opposition should engage in an objective discussion. It's not about accusation, who didn't do what and who did what. But he's just trying to draw our attention to the fact that this is a critical sector, and if you don't get it right, what you ran away from 10 years ago, you are likely to go back to it. So we come to take or pay, take and pay. Like it is stated in any power purchase agreement, you have to have some insurance clauses. And mostly in developing countries, it's important that the director also mentioned it, because the World Bank would need to really engage the IPPs to some extent to look at how they negotiate with developing countries, because almost every developing country has that issue of take or pay. And that is where most of these energy sector debts are believed to be coming from, because what is the take or pay in the first place? It's just a minimum amount of the gas, the electricity that is being generated is supposed to be paid for, whether you use it or not. That is why they call it take or pay. Whether you take it, you pay. If you don't take it, you pay. And we have the other option, which is take and pay, mostly common in the advanced countries. I'm yet to come across any African country that has successfully negotiated an agreement
take and pay,
and it's signed take and pay.
So the insurance cover, if I got it right, is like, if you look at how many years it took for car powership, for example, to build that purposely for Ghana, almost 2-3 years. Yeah. So I remember at that time, the narrative was that government is lying, it is not true, so they had to send some media personnel to go and see and come and tell the story. And I was privileged to be among those who went at the time. Now, is it that difficult to raise 500 million, 600 million to build a power plant that can generate, let's say, 250 megawatts, when the country can easily go to the Eurobond and take so much money and then pay over time? What are some of the challenges or tricks around some of these investments?
Like you stated, easier said than done. And they are heavy investments, and government doesn't have that money to go to the market to engage engineers to build a power plant. How much did we go for from the IMF? $3 billion, and we just got 600 million. So if we are building a power plant that costs, are we going to take the entire 600 million to go and pay power? No. So you would have to engage a company that would raise the money and get the plants built. And they don't also raise the money by themselves.
But it has come across as if it is a crime to go for take or pay at a time when we were experiencing Dumso and we had no alternative than to go for this initiative.
Important. That is what I was coming to. When you engage IPPs or power producers, they are private businesses and they are people's investments. And so definitely their negotiations are also negotiating on your part of weakness. So at the time most of our IPPs were signed, we're in a crisis. And it is often said that when there is a crisis, costs is almost eliminated. So government was also looking for a lean way out. And so a lot of the power agreements were signed. But importantly, it has transcended government. And so we would have expected that at this point, we are around a table. Yes, I was there, I signed the agreement. You are there now. we are not in a crisis. What then do we do as a country? This is what we would have expected. We engage ourselves, we engage the IPPs, we do a proper analysis of our energy demand. In the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how many IPPs do we need? Because at a time we are crying of excess power, we are still signing new agreements. At a time we are complaining of take or pay, it's still being inserted. It should tell you that it is not just as easy as we see that we should eliminate take or pay. Like I did state, development countries, you would find it extremely difficult to get any company to come and invest in your country because of one of the critical issues is politicization of our issues, because one government signs an agreement, another comes to terminate it. So I will need some insurance. So beyond the take or pay, there are termination clauses. When you terminate the agreement abruptly without the proper procedure, you have to pay. Likewise, the companies also have some commitments to government. For example, if the plant was supposed to be ready for commissioning in 3 years and you don't meet the timeline, you have to pay. Right.
So it's some mutual benefits.
It's mutual benefits, but
well, when it you hold it, we'll be taking a short break. It's getting more exciting. My guest in the studio is Adam Yakubu, Research and Policy Program Officer at the Institute of Energy Security. We'll be taking a short break. When we come back, think about this. You are paying more for electricity. You are paying COVID levy for electricity after what we were made to believe that we're enjoying free electricity. Now, one of the IMF conditionalities is that every quarter, government should consider reviewing tariffs, which means you will continue to pay for electricity. But what is more annoying, for example, is that in 2020, the executive director of Africa Center for Energy Policy, Ben Boache, was speaking, and I quoted something here. It says, Ghana wastes $2.5 million every month for not fixing capacity equipment. Think about it. And so, of all what is happening, the PDS, ECG, all those things that are happening, if government doesn't get it right or politicians don't get it right, you will pay more for electricity. You ration power in your own home, your own self-inflicted doom. So, we'll be back. Don't forget, ASAP's, how do you call it? Climate change lead would also be joining us via Zoom. We'll be back after the break.
Say no, me nyo bi a, me ne ba be ware. Ti so nyo bi na say, ne ne je wo ho a, utumi ma ne ware. Ohun ska we. $2,000 ke bia wa bo me no bia no wo se san e bebre
menim said ye ne Helena Shasi as a business partner it is a ne edaba kan nim se o ma na o so woni ni di de na wo dampe ne ko for ba for dia it is a wanya de
meaning say ha na wariti aka mama na faka wan shelinza
bra ready a chef on how ko sika we wia udi a chef na se no so do bi ma so ne nyo ba papa so wari se den crap a ne ne nji wana wari so ni mane ko why o ka se ko du
be ma die o shabra basia ye wo pa he de shabra basia do some level bia o so hu oba ni de mu de apasa level no
Obia kidnap Helena. Na me show my yellow. I just say yoko. And what kidnap Helena. So why you are compensation the order for? And if you are now,
na me ma de to de bia sa
papa na dwembo no ni. Wo mu na fun no se na boju se na yo.
Our before our baby na no go na wa ba so. Wo de fasu na ye na ya fa fo.
Adi ti no ba. Wo na twem na pen. Wo ja na ko ware oba afofo. Na wa sa ko kidnap no.
Welcome back. This is Ideas Exchange on TV XYZ. Follow us on our social media handles. Our topic is power sector debts, blame game, and real threats. My guest in the studio is Adam Yakubu, Research, Policy and Program Officer, Institute of Energy Security. Now, I want to share a brief data on the screen. It will help us to understand the consumption ratios. So you see from the pie chart in the middle column of the graphics you see on the screen that we have the consumption, i.e. what you and I in our homes take every day. And then we also have the industry, which is 32%. And then you have the 21% for, I think, service, and then we have agriculture, and then transport also following. So you realize that if you look at what the average consumer, that is residential, would take, that's about 45%. And then if you take a careful, cursory look at the the data I'm sharing on the screen, you would notice that the major players in this is Senate Energy, Car Power Ship. You have the Solar Asogli Power Plant. You have the others also captured here, the IPPs, which are playing critical roles in this. Now, let me come back to you in the studio, Adam Yakubu. There was a time we had PDS in the picture.
Yeah.
America was going to freely give us almost around $600 million to revamp our power sector, with ECG going to be the largest beneficiary. Now, over the period, it will look as if there's a cartel at ECG, and then beyond that, it will look as if of all what we seem to be pumping into the sector, the average consumer still pays more under the excuse of capacity or excess capacity, or in this case, wastages or losses.
Yeah. So what happens is that when you look at how our energy or our power sector is designed, we have the hydro and the IPPs one side, then we have Gridco, who does the transmission, and ECG Netco does the distribution. So at the end of the day, these IPPs, and they take fuel to fuel their plants, produce the electricity, give it to Gridco, then Gridco gives it to ECG, and ECG distributes it to us. So in getting back the investment, what happens is that it starts from ECG. ECG collects the money and pays it back. So if ECG fails to collect enough, then that means that the IPPs will not be able to recover. That's what the country director was trying to draw our attention. They will not be able to recover their production costs. And so right from the start, you are already making losses, which is not good for the industry. The ECG we all saw last month, when they did the revenue mobilization, which is still ongoing, the amount of monies that were recovered, even from state institutions, you would worry
within
that,
a month.
yes, the state institutions,
$3
billion within a
city,
cities. Yes, it should tell you that even state institutions, government-owned institutions, or the ECG, and are not paying. ECG doesn't produce electricity. Let's get it clear. ECG only distributes electricity. But their own inefficiencies as an institution also contributes. And so you always often have us talk about transmission losses, technical losses. The technical losses, it has an allowable percentage between 4 and some 18%. We in Ghana do 27%. That is not very good for the ECG. And so the whole conversation comes back to the raking in of revenue. If we are able to rake in enough and properly and police the meters. The managing director in an interview did indicate that they don't even have the requisite staff to man some of the meters. And in an era of technology, I wouldn't take that as an excuse that you don't have the requisite staff. You should be able to meter your catchment areas.
That zone your metering areas and assign people.
Yes, and not necessarily assigning individuals as people. Because when they were doing the revenue mobilization, what they did was they eliminated cash collection. Why? Because there were instances in the past, they go for revenue mobilization, they take 3 million, they come and report 2.5, and you always saw the managing director took a bold decision, don't collect cash. Anyone who is paying his debts should pay either check or Momo or bank transfer. We won't take cash. And that really helped. So it should tell you that if we bring in technology into the sector, which ECG is capable of doing. So I wouldn't expect that the human faces it. The cartels at ECG, all those needs to be worked at. This morning, it is an issue that we all have to admit that it exists. If we don't admit that it exists at the ECG...
So the cartels will be contractors or subcontractors within ECG who are staff of ECG or
meters,
or assigns of those people.
They give you a meter, the meter is not reading anything, so you are just using... So you see the meter blinking, but it is not reading any power or reporting anything. So at the end of the day, ECG will not have your data.
No, but this issue comes up anytime I have energy-related conversations.
Yeah.
U.S. government under MCC, that's the Millennium Corporation, or MCA, that's the Millennium Challenge Account, was going to invest so much, and the prime objective was to tackle the losses or inefficiencies in the energy sector. Exactly. Now, we brought this devil called PDS, and this devil costed us so much that the U.S. government was angry and then suspended a chunk of the money that would have come in.
Yeah.
That issue is existing. PDS took so much money.
Yeah.
It has not been properly accounted for. People who were related with this association with ECG are certain or still working with the company.
Yeah.
And then me as a poor man whose ends can't meet is being told that you pay every quarter. I am paying levy for electricity. And it appears as if the average Ghanaian is always at the end of the pain. Why? What? Help me. IES, what has been your concern with this particular issue I'm raising?
So with IES, our position has always been clear that, look, open up electricity distribution, allow private investment into the sector. One thing we all know for sure is when you allow competition, you get inefficiency. That is what we failed with PDS. PDS was actually coming in to allow private investment to manage the collection, because what happens is that when you allow private investors into the distribution chain, they come in, they are in for the money. So that idea of minister so and so says you should give this person a contract is eliminated, because the person knows when they give you the contract and you don't do a proper job, they have some accounts to do to the government. So issues of ECG are broad. The ECG needs to be opened up, or the distribution value chain needs to be opened up for private investment, even if it means we should zone the country for different distribution companies. Then we would, I'm sure you know that the enclave power, that the free zones enclave is not under ECG. There's a power company that does their distribution, so their metering and everything is done by that private company. And so you realize that you don't have those issues we have in the bigger space. So our position is clear. Open up the distribution value chain. Allow private investors, just like when we allow thermal plants. Today, we are battling with them because they have taken a strict position that they won't negotiate the money we owe them. The monies we owe them, like has been put out there, excess capacity. The money we owe them is actually monies that they have already generated power for. We have consumed. They are going to pay for their fuels. They are going to pay for their
So
loans.
what they are talking about is actually what we have consumed.
Consumed, not what is sitting there.
But they've created the impression that it is excess capacity.
The irony that is created, no, there are two issues there. We have a total installed capacity. That is what is available, thermal plants, renewable, hydro, put together. That's the installed capacity. Out of this installed, I'm going to use Akosombo as one. 120 megawatts. The dependable capacity, what is available to use is 900. So you hear Akosombo has 1,000, but at the end of the day, when they are going into submit their availability, they don't submit the whole 100 because there are maintenance times. And so the same thing applies to the IPP, such that they don't operate at the same time.
That's 24 hours times.
No.
365 days.
No, they don't do that because they have times they go for maintenance. So when you are not available, someone will declare availability. So there's actually a whole management of that space where Gridco, at the end of every day, would declare who is available for tomorrow's demand. Then IPPs that are there would declare their availability.
So it is strategic to have excess.
Yes, it is even accepted. Industry standard, you do between 12% and 18%.
No, but there's, while we are looking at even the IPP's debts and whether the agreement inure to our benefit on a larger scale, there was one policy that was introduced. Yeah. Energy sector recovery levy. Yeah. It almost reminds us of how TOR recovery levy has left us. Yeah. We've taken this for decades and we are still where we are. Yeah. What has gone wrong, if you have some snippets of information? Because I know, as you said earlier, it is difficult for some of state institutions to release information.
Yeah, so specifically with ESLA, we at the IES have a difficulty to actually peruse the data. And so you are not able to speak to the issues specifically. But the intent, when you read the law that established ESLA, was to what? Enable us restructure or always have some money available to pay for these debts that keep going up, because the IPPs, they keep running, they keep supplying us the power. And if we fail to meet their demands and they should shut down, remember I did indicate in our current PURC release that we have, the IPPs are doing 62% or so of the energy mix.
Energy mix. Okay.
So if imagine 62% is going off, already we are off.
So that is where the threat cannot be taken lightly.
It cannot
now, we did some graphics on the energy sector levy. I'm sure we played it during the break. Sorry. If you can introduce it without the sound, so that while we are having this brief conversation on that, people can appreciate. Yes, of course. So you see that the ESLA Act was passed into law in 2015 to address the challenges in the sector. We all know that just as NDC left office, the law it took effect. So in 2017, when the new government came, they decided to use it to go and negotiate for some bond, they said refinancing here and there. Now, $1.5 billion. The IPPs have engaged many of them, and they have spoken to me off record, and it will look as if government doesn't cough something, we could have crisis. Is that what you are picking?
Yes, that is it. That's what the data presents, because if you are taking some 62% of your total 100% of your generation mix, obviously you would crash. And so government should negotiate well. It is difficult because government can also negotiate strongly, because one, you don't have the money available. Two, the money that the government has received cannot entirely be used to pay for just IPP's debt. And so the IPPs would have to reconsider, and let's see how government comes out, but it is going to be difficult.
Now, if you were going to advise or make an instructive comment on what will be the best approach going forward, what would you say?
Firstly, let's tackle generation, transmission and inefficiencies within the distribution value chain. When we do that, we would be able to address almost 70 to 80% of the problem, because the collector of the money is not collecting enough. So when you don't even collect enough, then we are...
Where do you put the blame? Government is a critical stakeholder, where government will come in for investments, right policies, taking up previous initiatives and making sure they operate efficiently. And then you also have ECG as a critical stakeholder, which must also do its work well.
Yes, what has been observed in the energy space is that anywhere you have government participating and regulating, you always have a challenge. Where government supposed to be the regulator is participating in the affairs, is going to be a difficulty. We had a similar situation in the petroleum and gas sector when we did that's what brought about deregulation. So deregulation essentially took away government's ability to participate and rather to regulate. And so it's the same thing as of now. The state institutions that owe ECG belongs to government. ECG belongs to government. ECG requires investment that should come from the very government that is supposed to invest in ECG. But if government was taken out of ECG and put into private management, government then becomes a regulator. And so government would monitor. But this is the case. Government is complicit because you are supposed to invest. Your institutions are owing ECG. They were 2 years ago when ECG was doing revenue mobilization. It took the president to call the then MD of ECG not to disconnect VALCO. It should tell you the situation we find ourselves. A critical infrastructure such as VALCO owing ECG this chunk of money. And so you realize that even private investors take that cue because they come into the country, they see that your revenue, your utility payments are not really stringent, and so people continue producing their products with their electricity and then don't pay. I was pained when I watched one of the videos in the revenue mobilization. A company that was owing ECG almost 2 million Ghana cedis couldn't even produce 100,000 cedis to just at least pay something and let's renegotiate the balance. They didn't do it, and it was a foreign company. I wouldn't mention the name of the company because of confidentiality issues. So these are the challenges that ECG has, and until ECG accepts it that they have bad nuts in their system, then I'm not sure we are going.
But you can't eat your cake and have it. So people are already complaining that salaries are low, and you can't strangulate me by slapping heavy tariffs on me.
Yeah.
So what is going to happen is that industry, for example, has been crying that the tariffs you have introduced will kill us. And so either we produce less, lay people off, or we fold up and relocate to the sub-region. John Jinapor in his submission suggested that our tariffs are lower than Cote d'Ivoire. But the reality is that there are other related factors economically that are pushing businesses out. What does this mean for our energy sector, i.e. investments we have, government obligations, and the attractiveness to future IPPs?
Yeah, so the critical issue that IPPs, they are looking for is your ability to pay them their money when they come. And so if we are not well positioned, and like I did state, most of the payments would depend on how much we are able to rake in. At the end of the day, we pay through the distribution companies. And so if we don't position the collections of revenue well, so that IPPs who are coming, I know if I come and sign an agreement and supply power, you can collect my money and give it to me, then I'll be safe to invest. The difficulty that industry would have is, because power is critical, it plays an almost important role in their work. And so the only way industry will have to cope with the difficulties that they have currently with utility is to what? Ration production, and which is not also good for our gross domestic product, because at the end of the day, whatever industry is doing will translate into the economic data. And so the blame will fall back on government, that government needs to sit up. There's so many factors that affect the economy. The shocks that are there, government needs to reposition ourselves well. It's not been easy, the IMF, the debt restructuring and all that. but there's still room for improvement, we believe.
Well, my guest in the studio is Adam Yakubu, Research Policy Program Officer, Institute of Energy Security. I don't know what is going through your own mind and whether you are worried about how we have managed our power sector. For me, if we invested so much over the last 7 years or 8 years to create the impression that we've gone past Dumso, do you feel angry after the pain during that period and then the measures that are supposed to take us through the recovery path is looking as if all work done is zero? I'll take just 3 calls before we wrap up. I'm told I have just about 4 minutes left. But while we are going to wrap up, do you speak to the IPPs? What do they tell you that you think Ghanaians must know? And what do you think government ought to do urgently under this circumstance?
Their position has been the same right from the beginning when debt restructuring first came up. You know, the attempt was made to put them on the program, and they vehemently disagreed. Resisted. Until now, government has not been able to properly engage them. Sometimes, I'm sure the backroom negotiations are always better than what we see in the media. So, government should do better, should go back to the drawing board, engage them extensively, and let them see reason. Sometimes, you need to give them an outlay. Okay, we'll pay you, we owe you 1.4 billion. How do you help me and I help you? I don't have enough money. So give me time. Let me be paying you some tidbits over time. We should also go back to some of the capped funds that we have. ESLA, we know some of it is capped and
for example.
So we can release some of those to allow room for the monies that we need to be raked in. Then the painful part is the tariff adjustment. That one, it will be very difficult because even if you read the
Adam, hold on. I said I'll pick just 2-3 calls. Maybe some may ask questions or may add on to. First of all, let's know where you are calling from and your name.
Janga, northeast region of Ghana.
You are calling from?
Janga.
Okay, northeast region.
Northeast region of Ghana, yeah.
Good. Dumso could be back. We owe so much. All what we have done may be no show because of poor policy implementation. Your comment?
Thank you very much. I don't think Dumso will ever be back in this country because the current people managing the energy sector, they are competent and they know what they are doing. But what I want to say is that I fully support the privatization of ECG and VRA and whatever. Because see, my problem is not only just about their inability to collect their revenue, but even if you are going to look for power, your business or your house, the kind of frustration you go through is just unbearable. And it's not because people who are supposed to do what is right, they are not going to do because they know at the end of the month, they are going to earn their salary. But when it is a privatized, I think that everybody will sit on their toes to make sure that they satisfy the customer.
Okay.
Now, I was not comfortable again in the course of your discussion when you insisted that it's not bad to have excess capacity. I'm not sure people are against excess capacity. The issue has to do with take or pay.
Yes, but the impression we have had, if I can come in briefly, I'm happy you appear to be more enlightened as far as this conversation is concerned. The impression we have had is that take or pay is almost the right path any country like ours, a developing country, can take. Because if you look at the gold sector, the oil sector, you look at the cocoa sector, for example, so much resource here, we don't have the capital, and therefore the investor dictates the pace.
Yes. Yeah, I understand, but I'm saying that this issue of take or pay issue, you know, you and I is very aware that this country don't have the resources to go through that path as we are in now. We will know very well that the government is cashed up today, whether you like it or not. It's a fact. And then here's the case that we have to cough up about $1 billion every year to pay for power that we don't use or we don't even need today.
Okay, so before you go, I'll give you 10 seconds to respond to this. A government is in crisis. Dumso, you go to the investment community that you want somebody to come and do something in your country to be able to generate power. Either take or pay or we don't come. For a country like Ghana and like many countries in Africa that IES says that you'll be surprised that any country in Africa which is declared poor or is not well resourced, maybe take away Egypt or South Africa, and to a larger extent they are even involved. Where do you go?
Yes, you go for the take or pay, but I'm saying that it's long overdue. But now, we shall renegotiate some of these contracts because that is essential to help the economy of this country.
All right, thank you. I'm very happy for this frank engagement. Let me take another person on the line. I'll come to you to wrap up and respond to or clarify their issues. Thanks. May I know where you called from, sir? Hello? Is somebody on the line, if you can help me from the other end of our production chain?
Okay, my name is Hubondog.
Hubondog, where did you call us from?
I'm calling from Kappa, Abosu.
Make it brief, few seconds, and then we wrap up.
Okay. Let me turn into speaking tree.
But you're too, I.
Okay. Kasama can say, I will do Mishona, where come I say, do Mishona.
It looks like we've lost him on the line. The time is up. Okay, I'm told the last person to speak to. Good evening. Where did you call us from, sir?
Okay, I'm also Philemon, calling from Kumasi.
Right.
Aboka Junction. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
This issue that you are discussing, I don't see any truth in it.
Yeah, I'm listening.
It's like, hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can't see any truth in the issue that you guys are discussing.
Okay. Why?
It's like you are biasing.
Oh, okay.
Like you want to hammer on the weakness on the government in position. Meanwhile, your turn, the NDC 10, there were a lot of failures that the NDC couldn't do. A lot of things.
Can you cite one of them or two of them, just to be brief?
Okay. Concerning the issue that you guys are discussing. Hello?
Yes, you have not cited the example of what you want to refer to that has not been addressed today as we speak.
Okay, like the issue that, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. I think I can appreciate him. The fact is, this has been a very frank conversation in the interest of the country. Sometimes bitter and speaking about it is painful for those who are fixated about their interest without looking at what will be of interest to the larger public. The fact is, government owes the IPPs. The fact is, many things have contributed to where we are today. And we have June 30 to address. And we cannot sleep on this issue because somebody will be worried you are talking about politics or otherwise. But these are realities. Your brief comment, 1 minute, and let's wrap up.
On the issue of take or pay, I'm glad my brother mentioned that. But he couldn't give me an example that where we can have take and pay. We are hoping that now that we are not in a crisis, government will be able to negotiate better. But recent agreements that were signed all have those take or pay clauses that in them. Not to sound political. So these are frank discussions. We in the policy space appreciate efforts of all governments, and we welcome everyone to come together. We think through the problem and solve it once and for all.
That's a very strong note, because many people have said that the National Development Planning Commission has been weakened. They either scrap it and stop paying people, or we think Ghana first. If you look at US, Israel, Palestine, you look at Iran, China, you look at many countries that have succeeded. The fact is, people are patriots. Patriotism is driving the intellect that they have, and they see country first, not politics first. And because of that, they protect everything that is in the interest of the average poor. who are the masses whose taxes pay people they vote for. Think about it. Thank you very much, Adam Yakubu, Research Policy Program Officer, Institute of Energy Security. And thank you all for joining us. Maybe subsequently we'll give you more time to join the debate as we move along. My name is Ahainyo. Tomorrow between 1 and 2 p.m., you can relax and watch a repeat of this program. Good night.